You need to stay until the end, because this isn't a conspiracy. It's not hidden in footnotes. It happened on paper, in photographs, and in blood. And somehow, no one was punished. At the turn of the 20th century, while Europe drank champagne beneath crystal chandeliers, a silent massacre was unfolding under the humid canopy of Central Africa, not at the hands of a madman, but beneath the crown of a civilized king. Leopold II of Belgium never stepped foot in the Congo, yet he ruled it like a god. He did not claim it for Belgium, he claimed it for himself, a private colony, nearly 100 times the size of his home country. And in it, he discovered the one thing more valuable than gold: rubber, bicycles, telegraph wires, cars. The world was addicted, and Leopold intended to feed that addiction by any means necessary. So he built an empire of fear. Villages were seized, families were chained, entire regions were converted into rubber harvesting zones where the quota wasn't a number, it was survival. Failure to meet that quota meant punishment, not fines, not prison, amputation, hands, children's hands, cut off to prove their fathers weren't lying. There were no fair trials, no due process, just a quiet calculation. If you can't bleed profit, you can bleed. The Force Publique, Leopold's private army, marched through the forests with whips and rifles, dragging the unwilling into labor, executing the defiant, and mutilating the rest as examples. And all the while, Leopold sat in Brussels, surrounded by lace curtains and state dinners, watching the profits roll in like tribute from a forgotten world. The Congo was his, the people, his workforce, their suffering, his silence. But the world would begin to notice, and now the horror will be photographed. For years, the Congo remained a silent wound, festering beneath vines and colonial maps. European newspapers printed nothing. Belgian society basked in prosperity, and King Leopold II was praised not as a tyrant, but as a philanthropist. He was building schools, they said, churches, hospitals, but no one asked where they were, or who had built them, or why the trees cried, until someone broke the silence. It began with missionaries, British and American, appalled by what they saw. Men of God who wandered into villages and found nothing but burned homes, silent women, and children with no hands, literally tiny stumps bandaged with leaves. And they did the one thing Leopold could not erase. They took photographs. In 1904, one image in particular crossed oceans. A Congolese man seated in despair. Before him, the tiny severed hand and foot of his 5-year-old daughter, punished because he had not met the rubber quota that week. The photo spread like wildfire, and with it, the questions. What was really happening in the Congo Free State? Investigators followed, journalists, activists. They interviewed survivors, surveyed villages, and returned with numbers that defied belief. 10 million dead, whether from outright murder, starvation, disease, or despair. 10 million. Not a war, not a plague, an industrial massacre for the sake of tires and telegraph wires. Leopold's reaction? He hired PR firms. He published reports. He called the accusations slander. But the damage was done. The photos were real. The stories too consistent. Even Europe, dripping in denial, began to shift uneasily. Under mounting pressure, Leopold would finally lose control of his private colony, but not his crown, not his wealth, not his place in history books. Next, you'll see how this monster died rich, famous, and unpunished. Leopold never faced trial, never saw prison, never even apologized. He died in 1909 peacefully in his palace, surrounded not by the bones of Congo, but by velvet, gold, and Belgian nobles in mourning. The Belgian flag was lowered to half-mast. Church bells rang. Europe grieved a visionary king. He had built parks, palaces, avenues lined with statues. To most, he was a man of marble, cold, dignified, untouchable. But the ghosts had already begun to speak. The Congo was no longer his by then. In 1908, under international pressure, the Belgian government had taken the colony from him, not to save the people, but to save the country's reputation. They rebranded it, the Belgian Congo. Clean name, same blood. Leopold's fortune remained untouched. His personal estate was overflowing. He never once stepped foot in the land he claimed to civilize. And when he died, the crowds still gathered, but not all to mourn. In Brussels, a group of citizens booed as his funeral procession passed. One woman is said to have shouted, "Look, the butcher is dead." But most of the world moved on. The textbooks stayed quiet. The statues stayed standing. And the king who orchestrated one of the worst genocides in human history became just another name in the margins. He killed for rubber, for empire, for applause. And he got it. No noose, no trial, no verdict, just silence. And now, in quiet museums and faded archives, his crimes sleep, waiting for people like you to remember. If this story felt distant, it shouldn't, because the scariest part of history is how human it is. Not monstrous, not inhuman, just human. One man, a craving for legacy, an empire dressed up as charity, and millions erased quietly, not because people didn't know, but because they didn't care to stop it. And the truth is, that pattern still breathes. People worship symbols. They follow uniforms. They turn away from what's inconvenient until the numbers become too large to ignore. But by then, it's too late. So if it ever happens again, it won't look like a horror film. It'll look like a spreadsheet, a well-written speech, a king smiling for the camera. We don't tell these stories to shock. We tell them because the signs are always there, and we still miss them. So the question isn't just, how did he get away with it? It's, would we stop it if it happened now? Let that sit with you. What do you think? Let me know in the comments, or just sit with it. Either way, you've seen what silence becomes.